Hey everybody, welcome to CrazyTechLab, and I've got a great video for you today. In fact, it's one I've been looking forward to for ages, but I had to delay because EK announced that it was producing a product that I would simply have to include in this video, and that finally arrived this week, so I've finally been able to get this video out the door. And what I will be looking at today is basically a whole bunch of MINI-ITX motherboards and a whole bunch of monoblocks for them. Now, if you don't know what a monoblock is, it is basically one of these things. So it's essentially a water block, but it doesn't just cool the CPU, it water cools several other hotspots on the motherboard as well. In this case, the VRMs up here and the chipset down here. Now, this is actually the first monoblock to have been mass manufactured, and it is from Bitspower, and it is for the Asus P8 Z77i Deluxe. Had to remind myself of what it was called there. And this is a motherboard very dear to my heart because it is the first socketed enthusiast MINI-ITX board from Asus, and it's just an absolutely crazy motherboard. It's got a vertical VRM board up here, and I absolutely love this board. It was the heart of my water-cooled MINI-ITX rig many years ago. I was into MINI-ITX way before this, but this was just blew me away when this motherboard was released, which kind of blew everything else out of the water, but also when Bitspower released the monoblock for it, and I was just like, wow, I've got to have that. And yeah, probably one of my favorite all-time MINI-ITX motherboards, and with the monoblock as well, one of my favorite all-time systems when I built it at the time. So since then, we've seen a whole host of monoblocks for a variety of motherboards. They're now readily available for MINI-ITX and ATX motherboards, and EK actually offers them as a bundle with an MSI motherboard. So don't forget to check out the MSI and EK bundles that give you a leak tester, a monoblock, and everything that you need to add the monoblock to your motherboard. It's a really cool kit. I've looked at them in my videos, so don't forget to check out my other videos to see one of those. Today though, it's all about MINI-ITX, and we'll just put this antique down for a little bit. And what we'll be doing today is looking through a whole bunch of motherboards that I've managed to find monoblocks for. Now, there aren't many because according to EK, it just became a bit just kind of unprofitable to produce the monoblocks for the simple reason that they couldn't design and produce them in time before a new chipset was released. So this was around the time of like Z87, Z97, and those kind of chipsets. And if you remember that they were just kind of being released so quickly, and it takes time to produce a monoblock, especially for a MINI-ITX motherboard, because they're so complicated compared to other motherboards. And that's one reason why I love them, is because you get so much variation between motherboards in terms of cooling, and of course with cases and how they deal with cooling with the cases. And with motherboards, you've got the added pressure of dealing with the power delivery as well. That's why we have crazy things like the VRM daughterboard on this and the subsequent Maximus Impact board as well for the I think it was the Z77 or Z87 chipset. So yeah, I've basically scoured the internet and got all these monoblocks that we're going to take a look at individually here. And in terms of the actual motherboards though, what I've had to do is I've had to go back quite a way with Intel, because there is nothing in terms of monoblocks available for Z690 or Z590, and that's a real shame because there are some fantastic MINI-ITX motherboards for those chipsets that I would love to have had monoblocks for. But I had to go all the way back to Z490 and the MSI MEG Z490i Unify before I could find a monoblock, and that was from Bitspower. So that's still a pretty good motherboard. It supports 10th and 11th gen CPUs. There are some pretty good CPUs amongst those ranges. For me, the real killer feature of this motherboard is that it supports Thunderbolt. So that's something that I really want for my next PC. I'm seriously considering using this motherboard in my next PC because of that. And I'd be quite happy with like a Core i9 10850K or a 11700K or something like that, and dropping it in there and having a pretty kick-ass PC with a monoblock on it as well. So other motherboards that we've got then, sticking with Intel for the time being, the only other motherboard that I could find that's been produced in the last couple of years that has a monoblock available for it is the fabulously gorgeous ASRock X299E ITX AC, which is the crazy high-end desktop MINI-ITX motherboard that has quad-channel memory on it, which is just insane. This was at the heart of my Fantech Shift MINI-ITX Water-Cooled build. I was the first person to fit 3 radiators into that PC. You can see that build in a banner up above right now. Bitspower recently sent me the brand new water block for it. Well, it's not brand new now, I've had it for a while, but this is going to be a great way to showcase that water block. It actually made 2 monoblocks for this motherboard. The latest one I will be using in this build, so check out how we fit that and use it later. Moving on to AMD now, and starting at the back here, not strictly MINI-ITX, it is MINI-DTX. It is of course the ROG Crosshair 8 Impact. Bitspower makes a monoblock for it. So if you own this motherboard, or you plan on buying it, perhaps you're building a new Ryzen system with the new Ryzen 7 5800 X3D, this motherboard has a monoblock and you might want to use it. So next up is the Asus ROG Strix X570i Gaming. This is the EK monoblock that has just been released, the Quantum Momentum 2 with RGB lighting. So you can see that in a pop-up and another pop-out banner up above, because I've already covered the water block, but we'll be taking a quick look at it today. And finally then is the ASRock X570 Phantom Gaming ITX /TB3, because it includes Thunderbolt as well. So this is another option for me because I need Thunderbolt from my next build, and this one is kind of a bit of an oddball because it's not a particularly well-known motherboard, but it does have chipset fans and all those kind of things on it. There was some criticism of the design as well, but there is a monoblock for it, so we'll be seeing just how you fit that monoblock and what benefits it has in this video. So that is everything. So just a quick recap here. The boards that we'll be looking at is the MSI MEG Z490i Unify, that's down here, monoblock for that one. The ASRock X299E ITX AC, we've got a monoblock for that. The ASRock X570 Phantom Gaming ITX TB3, we've got a monoblock for that. The Asus ROG Strix X570i Gaming, we've got a monoblock for that. And finally, the fabulous Asus ROG Crosshair 8 Impact. We have a monoblock for that as well. So 5 monoblocks, 5 MINI-ITX or MINI-DTX motherboards, and a lot of tinkering to do. So let's check them out. Okay, so first up we have the Bitspower monoblock for the MSI Z490i Unify, and we've got a CPU in there. I think it's the 11900K at the moment. So pretty good motherboard. I like it because it's got Thunderbolt. MSI was pretty decent with the cooling as well here. So this whole section is just like one massive heatsink. We've got a pretty big heatsink for the M.2 SSD as well, and there is actually a heat pipe. You can actually see that just down there that attaches to this VRM heatsink as well. So this whole kind of thing here is just like one massive heatsink. If you want to water cool it though, we do have the option of the Bitspower monoblock for this motherboard. Now I managed to get this one from Bitspower a few months ago. You might have to hunt around depending on where you're coming from. It is a bit of a lazy design though, because flipping it over, the only thing that it is water cooling other than the CPU is the VRMs, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but the really lazy part is the fact that when you put it down, when you install it, which basically it goes there like that, that is how you install it. You then literally just bolt it from the rear of the PCB, but you don't remove any of these heatsinks. So essentially the water block only makes contact with this section of the heatsink. So there's no direct contact with the VRMs or anything else, which, as I mentioned, is a bit of a lazy way to do it, but it means that it basically allowed Bitspower to do it with minimal extra cost. And as we can see in here, there is a pretty good CPU water block section in there as well for a slightly higher performance than we've seen from Bitspower water blocks in the past, which just had like 10 fins or something like that. There are definite micro fins going on in there, so you're probably looking at much better CPU performance. So that is the option for the MSI Z490i Unify, and you're going to get pretty good CPU cooling. It will help with the VRM temperatures, but it's obviously not going to offer direct contact, but it will obviously make contact with that heatsink, and it will trap some of the heat and dish it into you, dump it into your water cooling loop basically. So not a particularly lavish option, but it looks great as you can see. Although I might have preferred to have seen a dark theme water block rather than the chrome here, because obviously it's a dark theme motherboard, and obviously a dark CPU only water block might be slightly more aesthetically pleasing. So that's the option for the MSI Z490i Unify. Pretty lazy design from Bitspower here, but it does look pretty cool. Okay, so moving on to the next water block now, and this is the EK Quantum Momentum 2 for the Asus ROG Strix X570i Gaming, and this is one of the best water blocks in this roundup for the simple reason that it has direct contact with a whole bunch of stuff on the PCB, and it's not too expensive either, around 160 euros. It's available right now for the motherboard, and the motherboard is available as well, so it's one of the more modern kits that is available if you want to add a monoblock to your ITX system. We've got direct contact with the chipset, direct contact with the VRMs as well, so they'll both be kept very, very cool, and you get the EK exact mount as well, which I really, really like. Now the top has a single inlet and outlet, as you'd expect with a monoblock, and the CPU cooling section, as you can see underside there, there's loads of micro fins in there and a proper CPU water block section to this monoblock, which is really good, performs very, very well. And the only thing you need to bear in mind is that the offset of the ports is quite significant. They're way away from where they would be on a normal CPU water block, but it's nothing that you won't have to deal with if you're building your PC from scratch. And pretty tricky to install though. You have to completely dismantle the top of the motherboard, but it is all fairly straightforward and the end result looks absolutely fantastic. So you need to dismantle most of the IO shroud and the M.2 and audio stack, but once it's done you put most of everything back together and it looks like it was made to fit, really, which of course it has been. So the end result, as you can see, looks absolutely fantastic in this MINI-ITX build that I've got here. RGB lighting, the water block looks great, so a really, really good choice for your... So the next one on our list is the ASRock X570 Phantom Gaming ITX TB3, and this is a pretty interesting option for anyone looking to water cool their MINI-ITX PC, and there is a monoblock available for it, and it is again from Bitspower. So here it is, and very, very similar looking water block to the MSI MEG Z490 Unify that we looked at a second ago, and thankfully Bitspower hasn't been quite as lazy with the design here. If we flip it over, what we've got is a direct contact with the VRMs and CPU only section in the middle, and as we can see there's a pretty decent array of fins in the middle there. The downside though is that the VRM cooling is the only additional cooling on this water block, which is a real shame, because if I pop it down you'll see roughly how it sits. And I've actually got the mounting screws in there at the moment, so it's not quite sitting flush, but you can see big elephant in the room, which is the chipset heatsink down, chipset heatsink and fan down here. They are not water cooled and they are not removed. So this is why the EK Waterblocks version of the X570i Gaming from Asus is such a great monoblock, because it allows you to remove this thing here and any noise it produces as well, and just more elaborate cooling. You water cool the chipset, you water cool the entirety of the VRMs. That's not the case here. In fact, I think what we've got here is just a slight lip attachment down here on the VRMs. You can see that on the heatsink, but you do get direct contact with the top row of VRMs up there as well. So that's like the original heatsink that you've got there. That would have normally sat at the top. So yeah, not quite as lazy as the Unify option, but it's not great either, because we're basically still dealing with the chipset fan down here, which is a real pain. So we're checking out the bad boy here, and it is of course the ASRock X299E ITX AC, one of the, well, probably the craziest mini-ITX motherboard that's ever been made. And also in here is the super expensive Corsair Vengeance 4000 megahertz quad channel SODIMM memory, one of the craziest memory kits that's ever been available as well. And as you can see, 4 sticks of it on this motherboard. Just an absolutely insane design, and it just looks fabulous from all angles. The only thing that is kind of missing is an I/O shroud. I'm not quite sure why ASRock didn't want to do that, considering this is kind of an enthusiast motherboard. But anyway, that's all beside the point, because the star of the show here is Bitspower with its fantastic monoblock for this motherboard. So this is the second revision of this monoblock. The first one, nothing wrong with it at all, but Bitspower has added this really funky installation design and a little display there, and it just looks absolutely fabulous from all different angles. And as you can see down here, it makes direct contact with the VRMs, and the CPU is the only other section of the motherboard that is water cooled, unfortunately. But I mean, they could have maybe done something down here to get rid of this heatsink, but there isn't really a need for it. The main hotspots, of course, on any X299 motherboard are going to be the CPU and the VRMs, and this water block handles them both extremely well indeed. So installation, you can see I've got a M.2 heatsink on the underside there. Installation, very easy. You just need to strap a couple of screws up there to the rear of the VRMs, and obviously you've got 3 M.2 ports on this board as well. The rest of the installation here goes to the top side, which secures like so. Is that, I can't remember if that was the original socket mounting points or not. I think it might have been. I can't honestly remember. That seems a bit too big to me, but oh no, it is. Yeah, I can see down there. It's just it secures to the original LGA 2066 mounting points, which is pretty cool. Yeah, that is about it. So I just love everything about this board. I've just got a hankering to do something with it again, even though it's pretty old. I've still got a 1090ATXE and a couple of other 10th gen high-end desktop CPUs from Intel kicking around. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe you can suggest a build that I can do with this one. Maybe I'll revisit the Fantex Shift, or I could use the Q58 or any of the other recent Mini-ITX case editions. But yeah, just for some reason got a real hankering to build something with this motherboard again, because it's still just an absolutely, well, it's like the epitome of Mini-ITX, really, isn't it? Just the power that you could have had at the time was pretty much unparalleled until you know, we saw 16-core CPUs from AMD, and even then it was only the 5950X that was a match for the 10980XE from Intel. So yeah, absolutely crazy motherboard. If you do own it, you're lucky enough to own it, then you will probably have to search high and low for this water block. I did get it from Bitspower, but that was quite a while ago. But there are a few other shops that did still have it in stock when I last looked, but you'll have to just search for things on a country by country basis. The motherboard also getting pretty difficult to find. I don't think it's available retail anymore. I think I did find it recently somewhere, but you'll probably be looking online or perhaps an Amazon seller or eBay or something like that to get this motherboard. But I thought it was a worthwhile inclusion because they are still available occasionally, unlike some of the older stuff. And also it's just something that's current enough and powerful enough and unique enough for me to want to actually build with it again. So that is the Bitspower monoblock for the ASRock X299E ITX AC. Okay, the final water block that we'll be looking at today is from Bitspower, and it is of course for the Micro DTX Asus Crosshair 8 Impact. So this is a full-on Republic of Gamers motherboard, not quite Mini-ITX, it is Mini-DTX, which adds about an inch or two on to the length of the motherboard, but the rest of it is pretty much the same in terms of dimensions compared to a Mini-ITX. And you can see here, usually the Mini-ITX PCIe slot is pretty much at the base of the motherboard, but you've got this whole extra space down here for all these gubbins. So it's a super cool board. I've used it in quite a few builds now, and have a couple more planned in the works with the Bitspower water block, because that's just something that I really want to use. So far I've just been using the EK magnitude block, which is here. I've just literally just taken this motherboard out of another build that was on the front cover of Custom PC recently. And yeah, this motherboard, absolutely amazing, but it is a slightly lazy design from Bitspower though, because if I flip the water block over, you'll see that there is some direct contact with the CPU and the power circuitry at the top of the PCB, which we'll look at in a second. But if I just show you where this thing sits, it basically just slots straight into the CPU socket. Oops, didn't mean to drop it in there. Thankfully there was a CPU to stop it falling all the way down. So that is basically how it sits, and that is all you need to do to get it to install it. So it's super easy to install, especially compared to the Asus ROG Strix X570i Gaming, which is the other X570 board from Asus we have a monoblock for. But you don't remove the VRMs or the VRM heatsink, should I say. This whole section here stays there. So you don't really get direct contact with the VRMs under here. It just basically cools the top of this heatsink. It will have some effect though. It will definitely mean that your chipset is a lot cooler and your VRMs are a lot cooler. So that's basically all done under here. You've got two fans in here as well. So they will probably be much lower in terms of their speed. They just won't need to ramp up as much, hopefully. And at the top here, you've got direct contact with this chip here, the two chokes up here. So that's all direct contact, as is the CPU. So if we just put that water block down again, we'll get a final look at how this thing sits. And yeah, there we go. So that is pretty much it. So you can see there's direct contact down there on those components at the top, and you can see roughly how it sits on the VRM heatsink, which is basically this whole kind of section here is just like one large heatsink. So that's the final monoblock that we have, that we're taking a look at today, and it is the Bitspower monoblock for the Asus Crosshair 8 Impact.